Hi everyone. I just wanted to point out a few things in this chapter. We were talking about robbery. There is a difference between robbery and burglary, so I don't want you to get confused about that. So I'm just going to talk to you about that for a few minutes. Robbery is forcible stealing. It is when an example of that is when a person uses force. They could brandish or point a weapon at you and threaten for you to give them your wallet or give them your purse, or they will harm you. That is clearly robbery. But an example of where it would not be robbery is if someone places their hand in your pocket and steals your wallet and you don't even know that it happened. And they didn't use any force against you. You didn't know it happened. That would just be a simple theft. But if you felt someone in your pocket and you tried to resist and they fought you and took the wallet, then that would be considered robbery. Another example is if someone goes into a store and they're taking property out and the security guard notices them and tells them to stop, and the security guard tries to retrieve the items. Maybe they grab the person and then the person turns around and fights the security guard, pushes him or her down, then that has now turned into a robbery. It's no longer a burglary where someone just went in and walked into Walmart or Vons to take something and they were quietly walking out, but then they used force to assure that they got away. That turns it into a robbery. I said this a little bit earlier. If someone uses a threat or they intimidate you in some way to get you to give up your property, that's clearly a robbery. In California, the robbery is a felony, and it can be, like I said, either someone draws a weapon on you or they use physical force, more force than is necessary to take the property. In some states, they have the offense is more severe depending on the value of the property. That's not the case in California when you're dealing with a robbery. If you're just dealing with a theft, if the theft is $400 or less, it's a if it's $950 or less, it's a misdemeanor. If it's more than $950, then it's a felony. It used to be $400, but now it's more than $950 makes it a felony. In California, you don't have to inflict serious bodily injury in order to make it an aggravated robbery. It can just be the use of the weapon. Okay, we're going to talk about, you can look at the slides on carjacking. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Purse snatching, this is one of the questions you have on your discussion, one of the discussion questions. So many states have added a purse snatching or sudden snatching statute that makes it a robbery even if no additional force is used. Some force must be used to take property from another person, but if the force does not go beyond that needed to accomplish the taking of the item, then it's not sufficient force for a robbery. So again, an example is if someone's walking down the street and they have their purse on their arm and someone snatches the purse off their shoulder, causing the victim to fall forward, or even the victim tries to hold on to her purse, that's considered robbery. But if a purse is just sitting on a counter and there's no force used to take it, the thief just passes by and takes it, then that would just be considered a theft. Another word for that is larceny. So another example is grabbing the victim and turning them around to get at the purse is sufficient to make the crime a robbery. What I want you to remember about extortion is it differs from robbery. You could make a threat of immediate harm, but extortion involves obtaining property by threats of future harm. If you don't do this, then I will do this. If you don't give me this, then this is what I will do. I don't know if any of you saw the new movie Widows, and in that movie, one of the suspects told one of the widows that if you don't get my money back, then basically he said he was going to kill her and her dog. But that wasn't a threat of extortion. He wanted her to get the $2 million back that was lost when her husband died in the accident. You have to see the movie. Anyway, but that's the difference between an extortion and robbery. Extortion is a threat to cause future harm, whereas a robbery is an immediate threat. All right, we're going to talk about burglary. It used to be that burglary required that the person break into a dwelling at night specifically to commit a felony. And today, it does not have to be at night. And now it can be the unlawful entry into a home, and it can be by breaking a window, or if you just know you don't have a right to be there. So, well, here's an example. A person who has a right to be there, like a janitor, he has a key to the building, but for some reason that night he decides he's going to take something out of the building that he normally cleans. Well, he had a right to be in the building, so he would not be found guilty of a burglary. However, he could be found guilty of a theft, and depending on the value, it could be a misdemeanor or a felony. Again, if a building is open to the public, then the defendant has a right to be in the building, then it wouldn't be considered a burglary. But let's look at a situation where it would be. So you cannot burglarize your own residence. The exception to that is if there was a protective order against you, your spouse got a protective order and you had no right to be there anymore, and you just decided you're going to go over there and retrieve your belongings without permission, then you could be convicted of a burglary. A landlord who leases property to a tenant can't just decide, oh, it's my house, I'm going to go back over there and remove a table that I left there. They just can't do that. They could be convicted of burglary. So the key in determining whether it's a burglary is the intent that was in the mind of the suspect before entering the home. And the difference now is that it doesn't have to be for the purpose of committing a theft. It can be the intent to commit a theft or any crime, any felony. And in California, well, here's what I wanted to emphasize is the intent must exist at the time the building was entered. You can't be guilty of a burglary if, say, you walk into Vons and you totally just thought you were going in to do grocery shopping. But once you got in there, you decided that you needed more groceries than you had money to pay for. And so during that, while you were in there, you formed the intent to steal some items. You could not be found guilty of burglary because you did not form the intent before you entered the bond. So it's so important that the intent exists in the person's mind before they enter the building. And of course, if you enter a Vons, a Target, that's considered a commercial burglary. If you enter a person's home, then that's the residential burglary. And I just wanted you to know that in California, this is how we define residential burglaries. Any person who enters the home of another with the intent to steal or commit any felony or misdemeanor petty theft is guilty of burglary in the first degree. So it can be any felony. You could have someone who specifically entered the home with the intent to rape a person inside. They could not only be charged with the rape, but with the burglary. So that's the distinction there. Now, these days, it can be for any felony, including a theft, and the theft can be a felony or a misdemeanor. All right, so that's it for this week. I hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving, and I will see you next week.